You can absolutely own your resuscitation if you control yourself, your team, and your environment. And these concepts were later put together into something called the 0 Point Survey. This talk was recorded quite a few years ago, but you will find these concepts are timeless, and there's something in this for everyone. The sharpest end of emergency medicine is when someone's going to die unless you save them. It's not enough to know what to do. To run a resuscitation, you have to be able to make it happen. When resuscitations go wrong or feel bad, it isn't always because of patient factors alone, but often involves a loss of control of ourselves, our team, or our environment. Mastering these begins with managing yourself. For others to follow you, you need to look, sound, and act like a leader. This can be rehearsed, and it works. If you practice standing, talking, and feeling like a leader, your performance will be enhanced as you eventually become that person. In the words of Professor Amy Cuddy, fake it till you become it. Performance in many human endeavors is enhanced by visualization beforehand. Run resuscitation scenarios in the highest fidelity simulator in the known universe, your human brain. This can even be done immediately before an expected resus patient arrives. Train for worst-case scenario resuscitation in your resus room. Our recall of knowledge and skills under stress is highly context-specific. If you learn something in the classroom, you might not be able to access that knowledge when it counts. Run scenarios with your team, in your ED, with your kit. So that's how to prepare. But when the patient's there in front of you, you need to stay in control of yourself. It's both liberating and terrifying when you come to understand your human cognitive limitations. We construct our own reality through imperfect perception. Stress impairs our attention, our memory, and our judgment, and none of us is immune to this. We need to build systems that reduce our cognitive load and minimize our risk of error. So we should encourage our teams to question us and remind us. Use checklists, for example, for rapid sequence intubation, and read back communication techniques. Your ability to withstand these stress-related effects can be enhanced through high-stress, high-fidelity simulation. And this builds cognitive resilience. If you think you should probably be doing something during a resus, like securing the airway, scanning the head, transferring the patient, getting another opinion, then do it. You are more likely to regret not doing something in a resus than doing it. If something feels wrong, then act on it. If resources allow, stay hands-off to maintain your situational awareness. No one, regardless of sex, can perfectly multitask. Your maximum visual resolution is provided by your fovea, which covers an area of your visual field about the size of your thumbnail held at arm's length. Outside of this tiny area, your attentional resolution is so bad that if your vision were that bad throughout, you would be legally blind. Also, our attentional focus is accompanied by something called surround suppression. If we are focused on a task like getting IV access or pushing defib buttons, our brains become blind to what's going on around us. This has the advantage of protecting us from distraction, but we may not notice some important stuff. So this is why a team leader has to stand away from the patient. Right, you've got your own house in order. How do you manage the room full of other people who, let's face it, are the ones who make all this difficult? This is hard enough when it's your own team, but a bigger deal in smaller units when you're dependent on other specialists. Imagine the scene. You yourself are well prepared, but the 6-year-old who's been hit by a car is on his way in. The pediatric trauma call goes out. There is a thunder of footsteps down the corridor. The resus room doors burst open, and in comes the pediatric resuscitation team. Now individually, all these guys are well-meaning, but put them all together and you've got a shit fight on your hands. How do we control this mob? The essence is to get everyone on the same page. Keep the team with you. periodically announce the clinical findings and the progress. Share your mental model of what's going on and state the goals. Okay everyone, primary survey is consistent with an isolated head injury. Let's aim to have him intubated and ready for CT in the next 15 minutes. This approach shares your mental model, it defines the goals, and it sets the mission trajectory. Then you need to task specific individuals, not the room. Don't say, can we get a second IV line? Say, can you please get a second IV line? Preferably addressing them by name, although in Australia we call everyone mate, so it's easy. Now you are the master of your resus room. Guests from other specialties will not function as well as you, or even normally away from their usual context. Conscious cognition is very energy expensive. This is why we get tired when we first go to a place like Times Square, where we're consciously processing this incoming data. But the locals are functioning more automatically, so they become less tired. And when we become more familiar with those environments, it's less draining for us. Think about it, there is more for non-ED staff to process cognitively when they're new to resus, so we need to help them through it. Inevitably, different specialists will have different priorities, and your job is to appreciate where they're coming from. So when you see this, the anesthesiologist may only see this. The surgeon will only see this. The orthopedic surgeon will only see this. And goodness only knows what goes through the mind of the pediatrician. Now, some people, of course, can be difficult and conflicts may arise. This can be minimized by assertive and polite communication, stating the facts, how you feel about them, and what outcome you would like to see. You can prevent some disharmony within your team by always sticking to the clinical facts and never ever directly judge other individuals. As well as never getting personal, there are some easily learned graded assertiveness techniques for when you must challenge authority. But even these are rarely necessary if you hone your persuasion skills. Even basic hypnosis goes a long way, such as the techniques of pacing, leading, and presupposition. Simple methods can strongly influence other team members and reduce your effort to get things done. If someone is being a pain in the butt, give them a job to do. Just make sure it's not an important one. So the venous cut down is not dead, ladies and gentlemen. It has one remaining indication: to relocate a surgeon to the ankle while you get on with the resuscitation and insert an intraosseous line into the humeral head. Never make someone's competence feel threatened. Their natural response will revert to preserving their feeling of competence. They usually do this with dogmatism, ignorance of information, becoming bossy, becoming angry. They stick to one clinical path and become ignorant of any contradictory information. This is very disruptive to the team. So try and make people feel and look good within your team. And if you must disagree with them or override them, always give them face-saving options. But ultimately, it's not about you and it's not about them. Put your patient first. If you need to jump through a hoop to get what you need, start warming up those quads. Some battles aren't worth fighting if it's going to compromise care further down the track. Okay, we've managed all the people, but unless we optimize the environment, we're making life unnecessarily difficult. The difference between expert and junior paramedics has been shown to be their ability to establish and control their workspace. We can apply that thinking too. Spare a thought to whether you have to move things to give yourselves enough space, whether you have enough light, whether you've controlled all the crowds, and whether you've minimized any disruptive noise. Be able to access equipment when you need it, and don't be dependent on others to set things up for you. Can you set up your own ventilator? Can you run through an arterial line? Or would you be helpless if you had to do this on your own? Let's finish by considering our patient. Here are some key treatment principles if you really want to own that resus. Master the time-critical procedures. thoracotomy, cricothyroidotomy, lateral canthotomy, escharotomy, hysterotomy. Know their indications. Practice them on animals or cadavers and rehearse them in your resus room with your team and your equipment. There are conditions that your clinical skills are just not going to detect in time. Use ultrasound, particularly in the shocked patient. Your clinical skills are just not going to diagnose all those type A dissections with tamponade. And please don't be that person who starts listing hypothermia and toxic ingestion as possible reasons why this patient who's been run over by a bus is sick. For rapid determination of the causes of shock or PEA cardiac arrest, consider using the 3+3 rule. There's a volume problem, pump failure, or obstruction, and with 3 causes of obstruction to consider: tamponade, massive PE, tension pneumothorax. This 3+3 rule is more hierarchical and intuitive, and more rapidly accessible in a time-critical, high-stress situation. Have a plan for when you get to the end of the guidelines. You be that call for help person who provides the options for what to do next. Even better, know when to veer from the guidelines and think. Do you have a plan for the anaphylaxis case that's resistant to epinephrine? What about the cardiogenic shock patient when you've exhausted all reasonable pharmacological treatment options? Some patients attend your resus room inappropriately. They are at the end of their natural lives. Pride yourself on being good at end-of-life care. Allow people to die with dignity and with comfort. And please have the confidence in yourself and your team to allow family presence during resuscitation if appropriate. And that applies as much to adult patients as pediatric ones. Finally, learn from the talk and die patients. These ones that got away should undergo rigorous analysis until you are totally satisfied no stone will be left unturned next time. Suck every last morsel of educational marrow from the bones of these cases. You owe it to yourself, your team, to your patients and to their families to make every one of these cases count. So, learn to prepare yourself and to control yourself. Develop the systems to reduce the risks incurred by your own human cognitive limitations. Control your environment, don't let it control you. Master techniques to lead, manage and influence your team and prevent conflicts from ever occurring within the team. Master those time-critical procedures and get to a point where the clinical stuff has become automatic. This will allow you to devote your energy to becoming the leader that people will want to follow. Someone who can make things happen. Someone who will own the resus.